What was the longest minute of your life? 8:59 to 9 a.m. Sitting in the car, shaking, sweating, gagging, sleepless, withdrawing, waiting on the liquor store to open. 18 months sober. Plank minute. When my youngest son was born, I had a C-section. Initially planned, but move up by 2 weeks after a routine appointment the same day. The baby was measuring small for dates. I was showing signs of preeclampsia, and he was 37 weeks, so my doctor decided to deliver while he was on call that night. Anyway, I'm in the OR and everything is going well. I felt them wiggle the baby out and nothing. Complete silence. I hear the clacking of the clamps on his cord and the nurses messing around cleaning up, but no sound from my son, and my doctor wasn't talking. I am trying to keep my shit together and held my breath when I heard his punk ass cry. He was completely fine. Scored high on the APGAR. My OB said he was asleep through the delivery. He was just asleep. That's too cute. I didn't even know that could happen. That's so sweet, albeit a little terrifying for the parents. Went with our newborn daughter in neonatal intensive care. The doctor said, if her bilirubin continues to climb, she could have permanent brain damage. She's 19 now, graduated in the top 10% of her class with a 4.0 GPA. Was president of the largest club in her high school and leaves for college in Washington, D.C. in August. My wife and I found out our first baby had died during our 10-week ultrasound, also known as silent miscarriage. Fast forward 6 months and we were having our 10-week ultrasound for our second pregnancy, and it felt like an eternity to wait to hear that our baby was alive and healthy. In reality, it probably was only a minute. We cried. It was such a relief. That 1 minute before the bell rings. Waiting outside the bathroom while my wife did a pregnancy test, when I heard crying I knew the answer. That probably needs context. We didn't want kids at all, and it was positive. But damn, is he a lil dude now. May 25, 1995. 6:31 a.m. Monsieur, the minute my mother told me my father had died, I was 15. I was 9 when my dad died. Now I am 15. Since then I cried about 3 times in total. I actually thought my grandpa with Alzheimer's died when I heard my mom cry on the phone. And I was kinda happy, as I thought he suffered too much. Then she told me. It hit hard, but I got over it in the surface very fast. Like, in 20 minutes. Didn't cry on his funeral. I was just not able to. I was not even sad. I have just accepted this situation. I might have suffered some psychological trauma, but I'm so sorry. June 7th, 1995, 6 o'clock a.m. Monsieur, same story. I was 9. During that minute, my whole life collapsed. It took me more than 10 years to rebuild myself. I'm now happy, strong, and expecting my first children, with a little feeling of sadness that he will never meet his amazing grandfather. It didn't take a full minute, but the moment between my daughter's birth and her first breath cry seemed like time stood still. TBH. During chemistry, our teacher asked this guy whose seat was next to mine, "Would you marry a Muslim woman?" Quote. He shrugged and said, "I mean, if it's the right person. That guy is my best friend, and I happen to be a Muslim woman." Yeesh, the awkwardness radiating from this. Also, why would the teacher ask that in the first place? She was the type of teacher who would joke around with students and stuff. So maybe she was shipping us. IDK. When I commented on how weird that question was, my friend said, "You're a Muslim? I thought you were Arabic." Like, yes bitch, I am an entire fucking language. And that's when I realized that my friends are fucking stupid. Where are you from though? Actually, I am from Algeria. When a wasp landed on my glasses and started walking around, I couldn't decide if I should swat it away, but I didn't want it to sting me. So I decided to stand really still and wait for it to fly away. It didn't. Instead, I had to close my eyes and let it walk around on my eyelid. I'm not sure how long this actually lasted because in my brain I was going to spend the rest of my life with a wasp on my eye. It probably was about 1 minute in real, non-wasp FaceTime. That is actually my worst nightmare. Glad you're okay though. The 60 seconds between leaving the plane and deploying my parachute on my first jump. When I was a firefighter, we pulled up to a car crash and I realized one of the cars involved was my sister's. The time it took to park the truck seemed like forever. Luckily, she was perfectly fine. Waiting to hear my results if I carried the gene that caused breast cancer and ovarian cancer, and many deaths. On my maternal side, I do not carry the gene, and therefore can't pass it on to my kids. Phew. It was longer than minute. But the day my son was born, he came out, let out a little whimper, then went ashen gray. Then it was a good 10 minutes of them giving them CPR and intubating him before they got him stable enough for us to hold him for a few seconds before he was rushed to the NICU where he spent the next 3 weeks. As it turned out, he had underdeveloped lungs and a cardiomyopathy, but he was totally fine after about 12 months of treatments. He's 17 now and towers over me. My mom walked in on me while I was studying from homework folder. Time kinda froze. During my college junior organ recital, I was in the middle of a fugue, playing from memory, as required, and had a brief memory slip. For about 3 measures, I trilled in one hand until regaining composure and continuing on to conclude the piece correctly. During those 3 measures, time hung heavy as a sash weight. Slipping on a fugue terrifies me, cause it's hard to get back into it. What piece was it? With the right confidence they'll just think you're showing off. Had a seizure on the metro. I do have them occasionally, but this was a full-on grand mal, full-body seizure. When I came out of it I was so confused. Didn't know what year it was. Didn't know where I was taking the train to. Barely remembered my name. There was an off-duty nurse on the train who tried to help me, but I was so confused and disoriented. She hit the emergency button on the other side of the car, because all I could do was mouth, "Help me," but I couldn't express why or how or anything. So I scared the shit out of her. I barely remembered who I was. So scary. When the teacher decides which student to question. I was on a boating trip with family and an 8-mo baby fell asleep in her life jacket and wouldn't wake up. We turned the boat motor off and all of the adults just sat there in shock panic as the parents tried to wake her up. In that 60 seconds I was trying to think of what we needed to do. We were in a national park with no cell service. Could we radio a ranger and get a helicopter? Would that take too long? Our boat rolled onto the beach and the baby's dad jumped out with the baby into the cold water to try and wake her up. He got her to stir and squint her eyes so we knew she was alive. It still took a good 5 minutes to really wake her up, though. The vibrations of the motorboat put that little girl to sleep hard. It was a week-long trip and that was like day 3. The baby was fine. She's a beautiful smart 12-yo now. But the rest of the trip we were all pretty fucked up. And that's still the longest 60 seconds of my life. Waiting for the subway when you're running late. The moment my daughter was born, wife had a bad reaction to the anesthesia after getting a C-section. Once the doctors had my daughter out, she had trouble keeping her body temperature up. So middle of the OR they told me to rip my shirt off and hold her on my chest skin to skin to keep her warm. Monsieur, those couple minutes felt like an eternity. The time between my boss saying, "I need to see you in my office," and him telling me what he wants. My mind comes up with multiple scenarios. I hate that. Tell me why you want me, otherwise I think I'm getting fired or some other problem, monsieur. Doing a plank. So underrated. I was pushing the remains of a teenager through my wood chipper when my neighbor leaned over the fence to ask if he could borrow some paint. The following minute seemed to stretch on for an hour as I had to calculate how I was going to pull him over the fence and into my basement, without being seen. What? You were what? I was watching the television and my mom came in the living room. I got up to fetch her the remote and I passed out. It felt like I had been gone for literally years. Turns out I was only gone a minute. It was really strange, and it's hard to explain. Criminal trial of a loved one. Sitting in the courtroom with every nerve in my body on fire as the jury filed in to deliver a verdict. What was the verdict and what didn't they do? When I was having dinner with my grandparents and suddenly my grandma says, "Dear, I'm thinking of killing myself. But your grandfather thinks I'm being selfish. What do you think?" I told her, "Grandma, I think suicide is a personal choice and no one has the right to answer the question for you. But I would ask that you really think about the people you're gonna leave behind before you do anything." Grandma smiled and said thank you. What proceeded was total, uncomfortable tension so thick you could cut it with a knife, silence for 5 minutes. She did kill herself a couple months later. For context, she was in her late 90s with terminal cancer. I think I might have been the only one who understood why she did it. When I was ready to push my son, and they told me to try to wait because the doctor needed to put on scrubs, I didn't wait. I started pushing cause fuck that. My body doesn't know wait. He was born 10 minutes later too. Lol. LMAOO, the audacity. When I got the news my wife had passed away, my mother-in-law called me and I had missed her call. I called her back and when she broke the news to me it felt like time had stood still, or almost like time didn't exist. It's kinda hard to describe, but time felt so distorted on that phone call. I was offshore working on a platform and I started thinking about having to arrange to fly back in, having to drive 5 hours home after I landed, and having to comfort my kids and a million other things and feeling all at once. The phone call only lasted about a minute, but it felt instantaneous and like an eternity all at once. "I'm so sorry. I hope you can find peace. Thank you. It's a daily battle. Ups and downs. Good days and bad days, but I try to live a life that would make her proud. It's only a little over 6 months. Basically every 60 seconds. Holding the hot plate after microwaving him. I got permanently kicked out of my school. My dad picked me up and we went home. The lift ride up was long ASF, but when I stepped inside the house I wanted it to be nighttime to sleep, but the whole day took too long and finally I got called to go to the living room. Boy, my ass got whooped, but that's long gone. My dad left us for another woman. Every minute on the treadmill, waiting on a girl he'd slept with to take a pregnancy test. It was 2014 or 2015. I went on a vacation to Mexico. I went to a beach, ocean in Cancun, I believe. I've never learned how to swim, and I don't think I will. I'm a chubby kid. IDK if that changes your buoyancy. But I've never been able to float. Anyway, I was very excited as this was my first vacation to Mexico. So I run in, swim around for a little bit, and then I decide to actually swim, monsieur. Well, I was fine until my foot touched a rock that was slippery, and I went under. My nose kept filling up with water and burning even more every so seconds. I tried to scream, but my mouth kept filling up with water. That was the longest minute of my life ever. If my instincts hadn't kicked in and I would move to the top, I wouldn't be here today. Sadly, it has its tolls. I cannot go in water without having a panic attack. I cannot go under, as I feel I'm gonna stay under, and I can't control my breath even though I'm tall. Anyways, yeah, that's it. TLDR, I almost drowned and I have a fear of water. The minute after I messed up my solo in my band concert. It was a very important concert for me since it was my only solo. The solo had only me playing and no background for 4 measures. My grandparents came out for it too and everything. It was the last song, very close to the end, and halfway through I completely forgot what I was playing and played a bunch of wrong notes. Then it was complete silence for what seemed like forever, and then I played the very end to cue the rest of the band to keep playing. Being the first chair on the very end where everyone could see me didn't help either. I just sat there shaking for the rest of the song and could barely stand at the end of the concert. I couldn't think of anything else and it just went on forever. In reality though, the rest of the song was only about 30 seconds and then the concert was over. Thank you so much for watching and have a good day.